Don't forget to like and subscribe. Story 1. The woods near Redwood Springs. A few summers ago, I lived in a small apartment complex on the edge of Redwood Springs, a modest town bordered by an extensive forest. Sometimes, I would jog along the well-worn paths that wound through the woods, enjoying the rustle of leaves overhead and the scent of pine in the air. One afternoon, feeling especially curious, I decided to venture beyond the established trails, those paths that most people stuck to and rarely left. The woods were rumored to stretch for miles, and I wanted to see just how far I could go. The running trails only covered about a mile into the forest before fading into a tangle of dense vegetation. Once I reached the end of the main path, I stepped off into the unknown. At first, I navigated through tall grass, stepping carefully to avoid hidden rocks and roots. As I pressed on, the trees grew thicker, blocking out much of the sunlight. The ground was a mix of soft earth and scattered branches that crunched under my feet, and the deeper I went, the more the woods seemed to envelop me. My heart beat a little faster, half from excitement, half from the realization that if I got lost, I'd have only my phone to guide me back. After about 15 minutes, I found myself in a part of the forest where visibility was limited to maybe 20 feet in any direction. Towering trunks and thick undergrowth made it impossible to see farther. Still, I relished the silence. Only the faint chirping of birds and the distant hum of insects accompanied me. Suddenly, I came upon a small clearing, maybe 30 or 40 feet across. That was when I noticed him. Standing on the opposite side of the clearing was a man, tall and shirtless, clutching a thick branch in his hand. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I had to blink a few times to be sure he was really there. He looked well over 6 feet, his skin slick with sweat or maybe water from a nearby stream. His head was bowed, and I could hear him muttering, though his words were too faint to discern. It was as if he was in his own world, speaking to the ground. Then, without warning, he raised his branch and slammed it against the dirt. The sharp thwack reverberated through the clearing, sending my heart into my throat. I wondered if he'd noticed me, so I ducked behind a large tree, peering around the trunk to keep an eye on him. My mind raced. Who was he? Why was he out here alone? The silence pressed down on me like a weight, making every breath seem unnaturally loud. Suddenly, he began striding toward the very tree I was hiding behind. Panic seized me. Then I heard him shout, "Get out of here!" The tone was menacing, almost feral. Adrenaline surged through my veins, and I bolted, sprinting back the way I had come. Branches lashed at my arms and legs, stinging as I tore through the underbrush. My breathing came in ragged gasps, and behind me, I could hear him running too, his footsteps pounding on the forest floor. I shouted for him to leave me alone, but he kept chasing me. After about a minute, his footsteps seemed to fade, but I was too terrified to stop. I continued running until I recognized the faint outline of the main trail. My arms and legs were scratched and bleeding from the brambles, but the sight of civilization, of the trail and the open sky, was enough to calm me. I never went back into that woods again. The memory of that man, his branch, and the wild, threatening look in his eyes stayed with me, reminding me that some parts of nature are better left unexplored. Story 2. The cabin in Greenview County. When I was 9, my family owned a small cabin in Greenview County, far to the north of the city. We visited it a few times each year, mostly in the warmer months, taking advantage of the tranquil lake nearby and the expansive forest that stretched out behind the property. The cabin itself was cozy, a single-story structure with creaking floorboards, an old stone fireplace, and large windows that let in the golden sunlight. Beyond the lake, the forest extended for miles, a seemingly endless expanse of towering pines and leafy oaks. One weekend, my parents and 2 older brothers decided to drive up for a brief stay. My dad and brothers, avid fishermen, spent most of their time casting lines off the dock. Not being much of a fishing enthusiast, I wandered off into the woods behind the cabin. I followed a few makeshift trails, just dirt paths worn down by the footsteps of countless adventurers or animals over the years. The forest was alive with a scent of moss and wildflowers, and every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of a squirrel darting between trees. First, I stuck to the trails I knew, but as my curiosity grew, I ventured onto less familiar paths, letting the quiet hush of the forest envelop me. About 10 minutes in, I decided I should probably turn back, lest I lose my way. Just then, I heard a crisp snap, like a branch breaking underfoot. I froze, scanning the area for a deer or some other animal. But I saw nothing except dense greenery and tall trunks. Suddenly, a shape emerged from behind a broad tree trunk. My eyes widened. It was tall, very tall, covered in brown fur, walking upright on 2 legs. It was not a bear, and it definitely wasn't human. It moved with a strange, lumbering grace, and though it was only about 50 feet away, it didn't seem to notice me. For a split second, I stood transfixed, my heart hammering in my chest. Then it stepped behind another tree and disappeared from view. Fear shot through me like a jolt of electricity. Without thinking, I turned and ran, my small feet pounding the forest floor. Branches scratched my arms, and tears blurred my vision. Eventually, I realized I had no idea which way was home, so I started shouting for my dad and brothers. Their voices answered back in the distance, and within minutes they found me. Gasping for breath, I told them about the tall, furry creature. My dad insisted we go back and see, but of course it was gone. For the rest of the trip, I tried to convince them of what I'd witnessed. They shrugged it off as a bear sighting, but deep down, I knew I had seen something else, something that defied simple explanation. Story 3. Motocross in cold water. About 5 years ago, I was obsessed with motocross biking. I had saved up enough money to buy a second-hand off-road bike, and it quickly became my pride and joy. I lived near Coldwater, a region blessed with rolling hills and acres of open land perfect for riding. My friends and I would spend entire afternoons revving our engines, racing each other, and exploring hidden trails that snaked through the countryside. One area we particularly loved was a secluded stretch of forest we nicknamed Timber Trail. It was about a 10-minute ride from the main road, and in all the times we'd visited, we never encountered a single person. The sense of isolation was part of its charm. No houses, no fences, just raw nature. One weekend, all my riding buddies were busy, but I was itching to take my bike out. I decided to head to Timber Trail alone, figuring I'd do a quick ride and come back. The day was clear and bright, the perfect conditions for off-road biking. After a short ride, I reached the entrance to the forest. The trail was narrow, and the canopy overhead made the light filter down in dappled patches, creating a surreal pattern on the ground. I navigated the winding path for about 10 minutes, until I reached a sharp bend that led into a long, straight stretch. But as soon as I rounded the corner, I spotted something that made my heart stop. A thin wire strung between 2 trees, about 3 feet off the ground, almost invisible. I slammed on my brakes, skidding so hard that my bike toppled over. Luckily, I stopped just short of the wire. If I hadn't noticed it, I would have been going full speed and likely crashed in a violent tumble. My heart pounded as I pulled out my pocket knife to cut the wire. Who would do something like this? My mind spun with anger and confusion. Then I heard a voice echo through the woods, a man shouting, though I couldn't see him. He hurled curses at me, yelling that I needed to leave or he'd shoot. Fear jolted through me like a live wire. I whipped my head around, trying to pinpoint his location, but the voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Suddenly, a gunshot shattered the silence. I didn't wait to see if he was serious. I jumped back onto my bike and sped off as fast as I could. Branches scratched at my arms, and my engine roared. After what felt like an eternity, I burst out of the woods and onto the open field leading back to the road. My hands shook on the handlebars. When I got home, I told my friends what had happened, and we called the local authorities. Nothing came of it, and we all decided it wasn't worth the risk to ride in Timber Trail again. I held onto my bike for another couple of years, but eventually sold it, leaving that chapter of my life behind. Even now, I can recall every moment of that day. The sudden stop, the glint of the wire in the sunlight, and the distant voice threatening violence. It served as a stark reminder that even in places we think we know, danger can lurk in unexpected forms, and sometimes it's wiser to heed those hidden warnings that tell us when to turn around and go home.